Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics. And it may be flying low under the radar, but the Conservatives aren't actually the only party electing a new leader. The Liberal Democrats are at it as well. Now, with just 12 MPs in the Commons, you might think it's a fairly unimportant event against certainly the background of a new Prime Minister being elected. However, we are in strange political times, and recent polls have shown a massive increase in backing for the Lib Dems if a general election were to be called quite soon. They also came second in both seats won and popular share of the vote in the European election. So they've therefore established themselves as the pro-EU leaders in the European Parliament, at least as far as the British allocation goes. Now, voting intentions could easily be changed during an actual general election campaign if the larger parties sorted their policies out. But the fact is that the Liberal Democrats are going to be potentially, at least, a serious political force again, and potentially within a year. That makes this leadership contest important, even if people aren't giving it that much attention just yet. Now, unlike with the Conservatives, the Liberal Democrat candidates are not really trying to outdo each other by offering the maddest policies they can think of. Fortunately, their party members have not completely lost their marbles. So who are the candidates and what do they stand for? Well, it probably makes sense first of all to discuss the common ground of Joe Swinson and Sir Ed Davey. They're both committed to stopping Brexit. Of course they are. Not only are the party members and voters overwhelmingly Remain, but their leadership doesn't pretend otherwise. They're also dead set against forming any cooperation with Jeremy Corbyn. Now, that means that, let's say there were a general election and there were no majority for any party after a general election, but a Labour Liberal Democrat coalition could command a majority. They're saying they wouldn't enter one. They'd expect Parliament to function with one-off informal agreements as and when needed. Now, that is an unfortunate position to adopt. We've seen in the past few years just how damaging it is not to have a stable government. Businesses especially, who need to make long-term investment decisions, don't know what the lay of the political land is going to be over the next few years. Such a parliament is unlikely to be able to make any firm decisions as parties not used. I mean, we're not used to compromising in this country. So those parties will start engaging in horse trading over many months in order to agree anything. Quite how a budget could ever be formed is completely beyond me. It is pretty unworkable. And I have to say, an example of playing to the prejudices of their party membership instead of having a proper conversation, which has been ultimately the problem with Brexit throughout. So why won't they work with Corbyn? Well, they say it's because he's a Brexiteer. Well, yes, he is. But that leaning can easily be knocked on the head. In fact, the first concession Corbyn would have to make in order to form a Lib-Lab coalition would be to abandon Brexit in favour of a public vote with campaigning to remain at least. The Labour Party itself would be overwhelmingly behind this, and they know it. The bottom line is he's quite likely to get behind that policy at some point anyway. It's really frustrating for a lot of senior Labour members that he hasn't already done so. But it is very likely before a general election takes place. Now, if the Lib Dems ended up being the junior party in a coalition, they could actually demand that as the junior partner. Never mind if they somehow ended up being the larger party. So that stance is pretty pointless and unworkable. There must be other reasons. What is of more interest, however, is their suggestion of, in the current Parliament, defeating the government, so vote of no confidence, Boris Johnson or Jeremy Hunt's government gone, and then forming a loose coalition of sensible MPs in order to legislate for a public vote with Remain as an option. So in other words, not going straight for a general election, but actually that sort of loose collaboration of public vote supporters. But even on that plan, they say they won't work with Corbyn. Now, the problem with that is he could easily whip his MPs to vote against their motions, and they would need his MPs. Unlike with the leadership election for the other parties, with the Lib Dems, it tends to be much less about policies, it has to be said, and more about the competence to drive the party towards greater influence in Parliament. In other words, who can persuade more people around the country to vote Liberal Democrat? And the reason for that, essentially, is because the leadership don't dictate party policy. The members do. Something Jeremy Corbyn said that he wanted in Labour, but he just hasn't got around to doing it yet. So the leadership contenders will always need to propose effectively the same actions on a range of issues, not just Brexit. Their personal stamp is in the form of like executive decisions, campaigning type decisions. Their reluctance to form formal coalitions may stem from a fear of what happened in 2015 when they lost massive numbers of MPs after their support base punished them for Conservative Party policies in government. So they formed a coalition in 2010 with the Conservatives. A lot of Lib Dem supporters blamed the Lib Dems for allowing a lot of those, frankly, quite nasty policies to go through. But I have to say, I would worry less about that. All they need to ensure is they don't get into bed with parties who propose policies that their voters, well, wouldn't be completely opposed to. People understand there's a certain amount of compromise. I'd say they'd be far more willing to accept socialist policies than the frankly evil policies that David Cameron brought in, that led, of course, to widespread suffering amongst the more vulnerable members of society. Now, there is a lot of no man's land between Corbyn and Liberals. Of course there is. I'll admit that. So I certainly understand why they'd be much less willing to work with a very left-wing Labour leader than, say, a centre-left one. But he is the leader. He is likely to be the leader for the foreseeable future. And I do think that they shouldn't be ruling out cooperative work to stop Brexit. That was where Theresa May fell down. She refused to cooperate. Now, on a personal level, and bear in mind I am a Labour supporter and not a Lib Dem, but neither of them are exactly igniting the imagination of the population. Yes, they are very much in the shadow of the Conservative leadership election, but the Lib Dem contest technically started before the Tory one, and nobody was all that bothered about it then. But as the candidates go, Swinson she's committed, the odd gaffe that could create problems in future were she to be leader. She managed to upset the population of Govan in Scotland, and it didn't help that she got her facts wrong whilst doing so. In her favour, I will say, though, she is known for self-reflection and being willing to change direction without the usual political nonsense of always ploughing ahead for fear of being accused of the dreaded U-turn. Not that Sir Ed has fared that much better. He has had to apologise for calling, apparently, for Boris Johnson to be decapitated. Now, he didn't mean literally, of course. He was using the term as a metaphor for removing him from the leadership of the party by having a Remain Alliance candidate in his constituency. In other words, the normal sort of parties opposed to the Conservatives don't put forward a candidate. You have a candidate that's just going to stand on a Remain platform in the hopes of defeating him in a general election, which could actually happen. Because remember, the Brexit Party are going to be targeting his seats as well. So his vote will be split. It should be a safe Tory seat. Probably not going to be. So that actually could work. That's what he was talking about, because, of course, if Boris Johnson after a general election were not an MP, he couldn't be the Prime Minister, even if the Conservatives were a large enough party to form a government. So that's what he was talking about. But nobody ever promises to report political statements in context. So now he has a chance to learn from his mistake. He's had to apologise for the language he used. There you go. Now, another feature of the Liberal Democrats is that you don't get quite the same quality of loony in the party. Labour cover the full left wing of politics, so you will get some members with extreme views, and some of them are not shy about sharing them, it has to be said. Conservatives, same sort of thing. They cover the full right wing. So you also get members with extreme views. And as a former Conservative Party chairman called them the swivel-eyed loons there. The Liberal Democrats are clustered around the centre, slightly more to the right, but essentially a party of moderates. So that can give rise to the accusation of being a bit boring. But I suppose, to be fair, we have to remember that colourful characters in politics tend to be interesting because in reality they are dangerous lunatics. And possibly at the moment, given our current political situation, dangerous lunatics we could probably afford with fewer of them. Now, the favourite for this contest seems to be Jo Swinson. Although both of the candidates have served as ministers before they lost their seats in 2015, and then they both regained them in 2017, Swinson is the better known. She's the better known nationally. I think she's the better known in the party as well. As for the decision, unfortunate timing. It's scheduled to be ready in the same week as the Conservative leadership contest concludes. They have already taken steps to delay the announcement just so that it doesn't coincide with the confirmation of the new Prime Minister. So it doesn't, so that doesn't overshadow their own announcement. However, I am going to say, given that the contest is not really making many column inches, and indeed hasn't been at all, I'm not sure it makes that much difference. Don't get me wrong, whoever wins has the chance to be hugely influential in the near future, possibly more so than Nick Clegg. They also have the opportunity to not be as much of a dick as Nick Clegg. But at the moment, it has to be said, the country at large is not all that interested. At the same time, it is probably only a matter of time before they do. So there we go. That's my view of the Lib Dem leadership election, the other leadership contest. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe for further content. And until next time, I'll see you later.